Hey, this is Little Vernie coming to you again, once again from Nebraska. I'm visiting with you folks from out there in the cities that think that maybe you want to move out here to the country, but I'm not so sure you'd be happy. Did I mention we was full? We're just clear full out here. We just got a lot of people, and I would just that I'm not so sure you'd be happy out here. So I've been trying to do some research to see what would be an appropriate thing for y'all to come out here. So I was watching on the satellite TV. Yep, we got one of them things that Elon Musk, he puts out them ones with the little square dish, and we got one of them so we can kind of see what's going on in the world and communicate a little bit. And I was watching a show from one of them cities, and they were making up some kind of nice recipes there, and I was kind of interested in that. I always like good food, and we got a lot of good food out here in the Midwest, and we always looking for something a little bit different, you know. And so they were talking about they were using almond milk in something, and almond milk, that really caught my eye, you know, because I never heard of the almond milk before. I've been out here in the country a long time, and I've raised cattle, sheep, and hogs and goats and stuff, and we've milked about all of them for one reason or another over years. But I never did milk an almond. I just didn't know that was even possible to do. So what we did was I went down to Archie at the dairy. Now Archie's he's been dairying for a long time, and I tell you what, I think he's milked about everything there is to milk. He's milked the Brown Swiss, he's milked the Jerseys, the Holsteins. He hasn't been milking Shorthorns for a while. In fact, for a while, he even had a couple goats that he milked, you know. There was that young lady over there in the next county who they found out she couldn't tolerate the cow's milk. And so he just went and got a goat's couple help her out, and he just milked them right there at the dairy and got her the milk so she could have that instead of the cow milk, and that seemed to work out pretty good. Well, anyway, I went down and talked to old Archie, and I says, Archie, I says, you ever milk an almond? And he looked at me and he says, no, I never milked an almond. I says, I milked a Jersey's, Brown Swiss. Yeah, I know. And he says, well, he says, I've even milked some goats. And I says, yeah, I know you milk them goats too. But he says, you know, I tell you what, he says, I never milked an almond. He says, I don't know how that works. I don't know how we get the surge milkers up on an almond. He says, I just don't know if it's equipped right for that, you know, because you got to have certain things in order to get milk, you know, out of there. You know, you can put the milkers up on it and stuff, you know. And I says, well, you know, I heard about this almond milk on the TV, and I says, we need to check that out. And he said, well, let's go down to the county seat. And they got one of them gourmet specialty foods down there places. You know, I said, well, you know what? That sounds a good idea. Maybe they have the almond milk down there. So we went down there, and we went into the store, and sure enough, here comes this little feller out. And he says, can I help you guys? And I says, what? I says, do you have almond milk? And he says, well, I do. And he says, you want some? And I says, no, I don't really want any. I says, I just wanted to know how you milk them almonds. I says, you got some kind of setup in the back here where you milk them almonds every day so you can have... He says, no, it comes on the truck. He says, comes in one of them little cardboard boxes, you know, with the wax on the outside to keep the milk inside. He says, we don't really have any almonds that we milk here. And I says, well, that's kind of discouraging because we were really wondering how you milk them almonds. And he says, well, I tell you what, he says, I don't know that much about it, but he says, I've got some raw almonds here that you could take a look at and see if you could figure out how it's done. We said, well, we'll do that. And we got there and we studying up some, and we just couldn't make heads or tails of it. So I tell you what, we says, why don't you give us a little bit of them raw almonds, and we're going to take them home and study them up. And so he went and got that little acrylic scoop, you know, they got that one that you can see through, and he scooped up some of them almonds, put them in a bag, and weighed them up for us, and we paid him for it. And off we went down the road. And we went down to Archie's place, and we were studying that thing, and we couldn't figure out how we'd ever going to get milkers on an almond. You know, and we got the raw almonds because we figured that if they'd been salted and roasted, that would take the milk out of them. So we went ahead and got the raw ones, and we studied that up for quite a while, and we couldn't figure out what the heck was going on with that milking them almond deal. So we decided to we are going to take our raw almonds, and we're going to go up to the high school and see Miss Bigsby. Now, Miss Bigsby, She's a science teacher up there, and she's really smart. She's one smart woman. She's got like this bachelor's degree, master's degree, all kinds of degrees and stuff. She's always going to school, learn more stuff. I get really kind of admire her, her thirst for knowledge. You see, I really admire that. Well, anyway, so we went up to the high school, and we went up there pretty early in the morning, and the kids weren't around yet, but Miss Bigsby was up in her room, and we went up there and we says, Miss Bigsby, we got a little bit of a project here, and we could use some help. And she said, what can I help you guys with? And she said, and I says, Miss Bigsby, we've been trying to figure out something about these almonds, but our eyes ain't as good as they used to be. We're getting a little age on us, and it's kind of not as good as it used to be. And so I says, we'd like to look at these almonds through one of those magnifying scopes you got. The ones you put your eyeballs on, and then you turn the little dials and you can kind of focus it in. And she says, well, yeah, I guess I got them set up over here, and you can sure look at one of them. And I says, she says, you want to look at almonds? I said, yeah, you got any? I said, yeah, we brought some right with us. We did. We had some raw almonds we wanted to look at. And so we got those raw almonds, and we put one up underneath that microscope, or whatever you call it. And we got to looking at it, and we couldn't see any way to get the milkers on the almond. We just did not see the type of attachment we needed to do that. And so anyway, we were looking at them. We pulled 2 or 3 different ones in case we didn't have the right almond, you see. I'm trying to be kind of delicate about this. Well, anyway, so we're looking at the almonds, and Miss Bigsby comes over and she says, boys, can I help you with this? And I says, well, yeah, here's what we're trying to do. We heard about the almond milk, and we're trying to figure out how that works. And she says, you don't milk almonds. Well, I says, well, how do you get the almond milk then? She says, well, they crush them up and squeeze them, and then they mix them with some solution stuff, and they get that all done together and so on, and then you got your almond milk. And we go, dang, if that ain't interesting, that you just kind of crush them up and you squeeze them, and you makes milk out of them with that stuff. And she says, yeah, I've seen it down at the store. And I said, well, yeah, we went down and checked that out. And she says, well, that's kind of how that's done. We said, well, gosh darn it, that's quite good. But I says, well, how come they call it almond milk then, if you don't really milk the almonds? And she says, well, I don't really know. She says, I just know how you get the proteins, carbohydrates, and such out of it, to make it the milk. So me and Archie on the way home in the truck, we were talking about that, and I says, I believe that the reason they call it almond milk is because they would have a marketing problem if they called it something else. And old Archie says, well, what do you mean a marketing problem? Says, now, if you were in a store and you seen one of them cardboard cartons with the wax on the outside that said nut squeezins on them, would you buy that? Well, he says, no, I wouldn't buy that. That don't seem right at all. And I says, well, see, that's why they call it the almond milk, because you just ain't going to go around buying a carton that says nut squeezins on it. Well, anyway, so we checked that out for you, and we do have the almond milk out here. It is available. And now that we know how it's made, we could maybe even make up a batch for it, but, we give it a try anyway. So you folks out there in Los Angeles, you just keep doing what you're doing and be happy. And this is little Vernie signing off from Nebraska.